Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so overview of the book of Obadiah. This overview is going to be different than the other overviews we're going to do because the other overviews are going to be over much longer books. And so, like, whenever we do Isaiah, I can guarantee you that's going to be a very, like, big overview because Isaiah is 66 chapters long. And I'm probably just going to pick certain verses and, like, just, like, talk about certain things to kind of give us an overview of it. The cool thing about Obadiah is that it is literally one chapter. And so, our overview is going to be reading through the entire thing and just summarizing the main points, right? And so, just to kind of go back to what we talked about in 2 Kings, the main thing you need to know about Obadiah is that it is written from a prophet in the land of, I believe it's from Judah. I don't remember if it specifies actually. I literally just finished this book too. I was studying it on my own. But it's written to the people of Edom, right? And so Edom, just to remind you once again, they're the descendants of Esau. And most likely, this is written somewhere between 850 and 840 BC. That is the later date, or I mean like the earlier date of the book. In which case, it would be lining up with the events of 2 Kings chapter 8, whenever Edom rebelled under, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. That was under Joram, right? Joram, king of Judah. And so whenever Edom rebelled then, it could be that this is whenever Obadiah wrote his book. The other option is possibly whenever the Babylonians came in and destroyed Judah altogether, in which case it could that'd be like 586 BC. And so we really don't know exactly when Obadiah wrote, but I would favor this earlier date. And so we're going to go through it, and we're going to talk about just some kind of cool things. And I think us getting to go through it verse by verse will be helpful because since this is our first kind of prophet to do an overview of, it gives us a little taste of what the prophets are like. All right, I'll read it. The vision of Obadiah. Thus says Lord Yahweh concerning Edom. Okay. We have heard a report from Yahweh, and an envoy has been sent among the nations, saying, Arise, and let us arise against her for battle. Behold, I will make you small among the nations. You are greatly despised. All right, so right off the bat, we got some fighting words, right? Obadiah says that God has given him a vision concerning Edom, which automatically makes him unique because most of the prophets are sent to the people of God, right? There's just a few exceptions that are sent to Gentiles, right? Here we have Obadiah who is sent to Edom, and there's two others who are sent to Gentiles. You know who they are? One of them is pretty popular.
Paul?
No, of the prophets, of the Old Testament prophets. Jonah, right? Remember Jonah, he was sent to Nineveh, which is in Assyria.
That's literally the book after.
Yes.
Obadiah.
Yeah. Which I don't think that's accidental. I think that there's actually, I've been analyzing that because I'm currently studying the book of Jonah on my own. And I finished Obadiah, then I went to Jonah, and I was like, there's connections here. And so there's Jonah, who is sent to Assyria, and then there's Obadiah sent to Edom, and then there's one other. Nahum, who is sent to Assyria as well. The way that you can remember who was sent to Assyria is that both of them have Na in their name, N-A-H, right? Jonah and Nahum. And if you want to remember that Jonah was told to go to Assyria, and he said, nah, I'm not going to go. And Nahum was sent to Assyria, and he preached the message to them, and they said, nah, we're not going to listen. So there you go. As for Obadiah, he was sent to Obed-Edom. Because Edom had been acting up at this point, and that is why God is going to get on to them. Right? And so Obadiah has a vision. Obadiah has a vision from Yahweh, and it's really condemning Edom. And right off the bat, you see that God says, I'm going to raise up the nations to destroy you. And to this, you might ask, what? What did Edom do that was so bad that God decided that he is going to send nations to destroy them? Right? I mean, what was so bad that God felt the need to send a prophet to tell them about this? You got to wonder. Well, Obadiah's going to give us an answer. The arrogance of your heart has deceived you. You who dwell in the clefts of the cliff, in the height of your habitation, who says in your heart, who will bring me down to earth? though you build loftily like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares Yahweh.
Kind of reminds me of the Tower of Babel incident.
It does sound very similar, because what is the same issue that Edom has as the Tower of Babel?
They think
Pride.
they can pride.
Yeah.
Well, pride's the root of the issue, but they think they're so prideful they think they can be like God.
Yes. Yeah, so they have gotten too big for their britches. But you'll notice that so far Obadiah still hasn't explained how they've gotten too big for their britches. That's still going to come later. But the issue is definitely their pride. Right? So he says, the arrogance of your heart has deceived you, you who dwell in the clefts of the cliff, and the height of your habitation, who says in your heart, who will bring me down to earth. Right? So they think that they are untouchable. Right? Edom, have you ever heard of Petra? Like the land of Petra with like these beautiful carved red stone canyons and stuff. That's modern, like that's where Edom was, right? It's just like it's in like modern day Jordan, right? Just south of where Israel's at, like south and east of Israel. And so that's modern day Edom, and they dwelled in the cliffs and stuff, right? And he says, "Oh, you think you're untouchable because you have the high ground? You're not untouchable. Though you build loftily like the eagle, though you set your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down." The idea is that they can go as high as they want, but God is still higher, and he will smush them. If thieves came to you, if robbers by night, oh, how you will be ruined. Would they not thieve only till they had enough? If grape gatherers came to you, would they not allow some gleanings to remain? So God says, it would be better for you if thieves came for you. Because if thieves came for you, they would at least only take a little, right? Thieves, they can only take so much as they can hold in their hands, or they'll only take so much as they want. He says, I'm not leaving anything. God says, whenever I show up, you're going to be demolished. There's not going to be anything left. Oh, how Esau will be searched out and his hidden treasures ransacked. Notice how Obadiah does mention Esau there, right? He has not forgotten the ancestral history between Israel and Edom. And that is going to be a key reason as to why God is so mad at Edom, right? Because once again, he still hasn't explained why. He has simply said that Edom has been super arrogant and proud. But we don't know how he has demonstrated that pride quite yet. All the men who have a covenant with you will send you forth to the border, and the men at peace with you will deceive you and overpower you. They who eat your bread will set an ambush for you. There is no discernment in him. So the idea is like, okay, so first off, your height won't save you, right? You won't be able to hide in the cliffs. Secondly, your money and your wealth won't save you because you're going to be ransacked. And thirdly, your allies won't be able to save you, right? Bless you. He says your allies are going to turn against you. You're going to run to them for help, and they're going to send you to the border, right? You're going to go into their palaces. You're going to say, please help me. And they're going to say, get out of here, right? They offered you covenants, but they're going to break those covenants because they do not want anything to do with you because your destruction is going to be that certain. Will I not on that day, declares Yahweh, cause the wise men to perish from Edom and discernment from the mountains of Esau? So not only will their physical height not help them, not only will their wealth not help them, not only will their allies not help them, but their battle strategy won't help either. Because God says, I'm going to make it to where there's no wise men in there who can help you out. Right? I'm going to dull people's minds. I'm going to make it to where they can't discern a good strategy to help you. And so the last resort is, all right, well, maybe our soldiers will just be strong enough to fight a good battle. Then your mighty men will be dismayed, O Teman. Oh, that's just a city in Edom. Then your mighty men will be dismayed, O Teman, so that each one may be cut off from the mountain of Esau by slaughter. So God says, there is no escape. Right? To quote Darth Vader. I'm just getting all sorts of Star Wars references in today. Right? Even the high ground thing, right? I mean, it's crazy. And so he says, your physical location won't help you. Your wealth won't help you. Your allies won't help you. Your strategists, they won't help you. And your soldiers won't help you. I will dismantle everything. God is powerful, right? And keep in mind, this is the God of Israel who is speaking to Edom, and he's talking about raising up other nations to destroy them. So he's not talking about Israel and Judah. He's talking about Gentile nations rising up to destroy Edom. So the God of Israel is speaking as the authoritative God of all creation. So yes, his home might be in Jerusalem, but he's the God of all. And he says, whenever I want to judge you, I will judge you. And so the question becomes, why? What did they do that was so offensive to God that that demonstrated that their pride was that exceeding? What could they have possibly done to merit God's disfavor to this degree? Verse 10 gives us the answer. Because of violence to your brother Jacob, you will be covered with shame, and you will be cut off forever. On the day that you stood aloof, on the day that strangers took his wealth captive, and foreigners entered his gate and cast lots for Jerusalem, you too were as one of them. So why is it that God is so mad at Edom? Because they didn't come to their brother's defense, right? And they didn't help out. He says, you and Jacob were brothers. Whenever Jacob suffered, you should have helped him out. You were supposed to be a servant to Jacob. But instead, you rebelled against him. And whenever everybody else turned against Jacob, so did you. And so that's why I'm saying that this is where we get this is really the one place where we get chronological information. Because there's really only two places where this really could have applied. In 2 Kings chapter 8, we know that Edom rebelled against Judah, right? And so it could apply there. But we do know later on in 2 Kings that Babylon does lay siege to Jerusalem and take everything captive. And I don't think it mentions Edom anywhere there, but it could be that in the midst of all that, Edom came in and also ransacked them, right? But that is the reason why God is so mad at them, right? He says, you were supposed to be their brother. You were my brother, Anakin. Sorry, I haven't even watched Star Wars lately. This is just, okay.
It's been happening with my mind too.
But he says, you were supposed to be the brother to them, yet you betrayed them. And whenever everybody turned against them, you just supported their adversaries. And rather than running to their aid, you actually contributed to their hardship. He says, that is what I have against you. And in God's eyes, that is the most arrogant thing you can do. This is why when it comes to the stuff that started back in October of last year, I've got no choice but to support Israel, right? I'm not saying that Israel has done everything perfectly. I'm just saying that theologically speaking, I've got to be on Israel's side. Because even if I think that Israel has hardened themselves against God, going back to Genesis chapter 12, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who slight you. Right? God does not take it lightly whenever you oppose his people. Right? Even though we know from the Old Testament that Judah deserved what they got. Right? So you can't simply say, oh, well, it's okay whenever the people of Israel deserve it. No. We know that the Edomites rebelling against Judah was a consequence of their rebellion against God. And we know the Babylonians destroying Judah was a consequence of their rebellion against God. And so in both of those instances, Judah was in the wrong. But God still says, I don't care if my people are in the wrong. You should have defended them. Right? Because ultimately, vengeance belongs to who? God. Right? Our job is simply to stand for God. Right? And if God says stand for them, okay, I stand for them. Right? And so that is why God is so mad at them. He says, you have the audacity to stand up against my people. Who do you think you are? You betrayed your brother. You were supposed to be a servant to your brother, yet you betrayed him, and you rejoiced in his downfall. What type of brother is that? How dare you oppose my people? That's why God is so mad. Now do not look on your brother's day with triumph, the day of his misfortune, and do not be glad over the sons of Judah in the day when they perish. And do not let your mouth speak great things in the day of their distress. Do not enter the gate of my people in the day of their disaster. Indeed, you do not look on their calamity with triumph in the day of their disaster. And do not send out their wealth in the day of their disaster. Do you see the emphasis there?
Disaster.
God uses a series of phrases to emphasize how they should have felt about Judah. The Edomites, they used Judah's hardship as an opportunity for their own personal gain. But he says, this is your brother. Do you not realize what they're going through? This is the day of their misfortune. The day when they're perishing. The day of their distress. the day of their disaster, day of their disaster, day of their disaster. He says this is not, like, this is a tragic day. Yes, it comes as judgment from him, but God is the one who does the judging, right? You, Edom, should have defended them. Or at the very least, you shouldn't be rejoicing in it, right? You shouldn't have taken advantage of their weakness. So he's basically commanding them, stop doing what you're doing. Stop taking advantage of them. Don't enter into the gate. Don't steal from them. Don't mess with them anymore. Do not stand at the fork of the road to cut down those among them who escape, and do not deliver over their survivors in the day of their disaster. The imagery is of the people of Judah fleeing for their lives, and the people of Edom taking advantage of their weakness, cutting down their survivors to loot them, or taking them prisoner and delivering them over to their enemies. He says, don't you dare do that. These are still my people, right? I can judge them. It's kind of like the older brother who says, like, hey, nobody can bully my brother except for me, right? God's saying, I can afflict my people. You cannot, right? And the same thing is going to be true for Assyria and Babylon, right? God is going to send, like, he's going to use the Assyrians and Babylonians to judge his people, but he is also going to judge Assyria and Babylon. Because they weren't doing that because they were trying to serve God. They were doing that out of their own selfish ambition. God simply used that to accomplish his will. Right? This is where, once again, you're seeing the sovereignty of God and the complexity of all these things. Right? And so God says, don't you dare oppose them anymore. For the day of Yahweh draws near on all the nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your dealings will return on your own head. God will not be mocked. What a man sows, that he shall reap. Right? That is what God is communicating here. The central theme of all the prophets is the phrase Yom Yahweh, the day of Yahweh, the day of the Lord. Right? The prophets are constantly saying the day of the Lord is coming, and the day of the Lord can mean several different things. Most often it refers to the day of judgment. Right? It is literally Judgment Day. But there can be many little d days of the Lord, and then there's also the capital D day of the Lord, right? And so throughout history, there have been many days of the Lord, right? Whenever the Assyrians destroyed Samaria, that's a day of the Lord, right? Whenever the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem, day of the Lord. Whenever the Romans destroyed Jerusalem, day of the Lord. But all Scripture testifies to the fact that there will be this one final day of the Lord, wherein everybody will be judged. And that's what Obadiah is ultimately pointing to, right? Yes, Edom will be judged in the short term, right? Currently, if you go look on a map, you'll notice Edom is not there, right? Edom has been destroyed. But what Obadiah says here spans far beyond that. He says, the day of Yahweh draws near on all nations, right? Yahweh may be the God of Israel, but he's going to judge everybody. As you have done, it will be done to you. Right? This is why in the New Testament they say everybody must stand before the judgment seat of Christ. Right? Every single one of us. Because just as you all drank on my holy mountain, all the nations will drink continually. They will drink and swallow, and they will be as if they never were. What is it that the nations are drinking?
The cup of God's wrath.
The cup of God's wrath. He says, y'all had the audacity. Like, notice what they're being judged for. They're being judged for opposing Israel. Right? He says, you had the audacity to barge into Jerusalem and drink their wine while they were being oppressed. All right. Well, I'll give you something else to drink. And you're not going to like it very much. Right? You drank on my holy mountain? All right. Well, I'll give you a holy mountain to drink. Right? You're not going to like it at all. But on Mount Zion, there will be those who escape, and it will be holy. You see the glimmer of hope here? On Mount Zion, so Mount Zion refers to specifically Jerusalem, but the idea is with the people of God, there will be those who escape. Notice that does not mean that God is going to save everybody of Israel and Judah. He says there's going to be a remnant, right? There's going to be a remnant who does escape judgment, and they will be saved. And you've got to realize throughout all Scripture, that is what God is promising, right? God promises, whenever he says that Israel, his people, he's not saying that everybody's going to be saved. But there's a remnant, and there's always going to be a remnant, right? And we believe that to this day, right? There will be a remnant who is saved. Whenever you get to Revelation, it talks about the 144,000 Jews, right? There's a remnant. right? But on Mount Zion there will be those who escape, and it will be holy. And the house of Jacob will possess their possessions. So Jacob will be restored, right? And the things that you looted from them, they're going to own again. Then the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. So the house of Jacob is representing all Israel, but the house of Joseph specifically represents the northern kingdom of Israel. So what you have being taught here is that eventually the kingdoms are going to be unified again, right? So Judah and Israel will be unified once more. And the house of Esau will be a stubble, right? So right now, Edom, you're rejoicing in Judah's downfall. But in the end, you are simply going to be the stubble left behind whenever Judah and Israel are burning brightly. So he says, this is what you get for rejoicing in my people's misfortune. And they will set them on fire and consume them, so that there will be no survivor of the house of Esau, for Yahweh has spoken. You oppose my people, there won't be a single one left. Israel and Judah, I will judge them, but I'm going to save a remnant. Right? I'm not going to destroy them entirely. You, I will destroy entirely. That's why you don't really hear about Edomites running around anymore. Right? Jews still exist to this day. Right? God has saved them. Edomites, they're gone. Then those of the Negev will possess the mountain of Esau. So Negev literally just means south, but it's also the term used for the southern desert in Israel, right? So Edom was just south of Israel, of Judah, and so those of the south will go down and possess the mountain of Esau. And those of the Shephelah, the Philistine plain, and they will possess the territory of Ephraim and the territory of Samaria, and Benjamin will possess Gilead. So not only will Israel and Judah regain their possessions, but they'll expand beyond their possessions. And the exiles of this military force, of the sons of Israel, who are among the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem who are in the Sepharad will possess the cities of the Negev. Right? So we have this going even further. Right? The military force possessing Zarephath is up in Sidon, just directly north. Right? The Sepharad, we don't fully know exactly where that is, but some have said that it's like super far away, possibly even in like Spain, which is crazy. Because the idea, what God is saying here is not only will I restore to Israel and Judah their possessions, but I will fulfill my covenant to Abraham and give them the land that I promised them. But he says, you know what? I'm going to go beyond that. I'm going to give them everything. And they're going to possess not only the land I promised to Abraham, but the land stretching from sea to shining sea. All of that will be theirs. And the saviors will ascend Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau, and the kingdom will belong to Yahweh. So he says, right now you rejoice over my people's destruction, but one day they're going to be the ones judging you. And the kingdom, that's going to be mine. Right? And that's the end of Obadiah. Right? Obadiah, super short book. Right? It's literally 21 verses, super action-packed, super fun. I spent about a month going through this book very recently because I'm literally working my way through the minor prophets. In many ways, I was doing that to prepare for this. By the looks of it, we're going to catch up with me very quickly because I've been going more in depth than I intended because they're really good. The minor prophets, or just the prophets in general, are often very overlooked. So in general, our churches don't study the Old Testament nearly enough. And of the books in the Old Testament, I would say that the prophets, they're not the least read books, but they're the most lazily handled books, right? Because usually the only time people read the prophets is whenever they're looking for stuff about the Messiah. And I think that's unfortunate because there is a lot more, like the Messiah stuff's cool, but it goes beyond that, right? God wrote these for more reasons than just that. But there are messianic overtones to this whole thing, right? Because ultimately, who rules over the city of Jerusalem? God, but specifically through David and his dynasty, right? But this ends by saying the kingdom will belong to Yahweh. Usually you would expect it to say the kingdom will belong to like David or something like that, right? Especially because throughout this whole thing, he has been using, the ancestral language, right? He's been talking about Jacob and Joseph and Ephraim and all, he's been using language like that. You would expect him to say the kingdom will belong to David, but he doesn't say that. He says the kingdom will belong to Yahweh. That doesn't directly confirm that the Messiah will be God in the flesh, but it also doesn't contradict it whenever it turns out he is God in the flesh. To where you're like, oh wow, that actually makes sense. It belongs to both Yahweh and to David. Because it turns out that Yahweh came in the flesh and he was born as the son of David. Right? And so stuff like that's really cool. And so there's Obadiah. Super short overview. Anything y'all want to add? Cool. All right. Look at that, guys. We successfully got through 2 Kings chapter 8 and Obadiah chapter 1. We covered 2 chapters today, and we're still getting out earlier than we have for the last few weeks. Isn't that crazy?